Okay, welcome to today's video where we're going to be building the Mr. deck. Mr. I don't know. It's spelled Mr. but the R's capital in it. So the Mr. deck, you can find it on Thingiverse, that way you can follow along and build it. It's a Stream Deck and MIDI controller. I'm just going to be using it as a Stream Deck. I picked this one because it has a couple of potentiometers here to control volume, and I have a couple of different microphone setups that I use. So sometimes I'll use the audio from the computer, sometimes I'll use the headset, sometimes I'll use the camera audio, and when I start doing more of these interviews, I'll probably be using my webcam and just use the microphone on the webcam until I get something else. So it has 4 setups, so it'll cover all of the volumes that I want to control, and then it's got some buttons here. So all what I've done that's not recorded in the video is the actual 3D printing process, because that's boring. There's really nothing to watch there other than 3D printing. So you just, put it in the slicer, slice it, put it in your Ender 3 like I have, or whatever 3D printer you have, print it out, and that's it. So I did that off camera. I will do some of the nut certs here on camera. I only put in a couple of them just to do some test fitting, and also just to get get started on it and make sure everything fit right. I did some of the diodes just to make sure everything lined up right. So yeah, I got a little bit of a head start before the video, but I've been waiting like 2 months now for all the parts to show up. I got the Arduino Pro Mini had been stuck in customs, so it's just been there for a long time. So I actually ordered another one off of Amazon instead of waiting, because it's been in customs for like a month now. I have no clue if customs is ever going to release it. So yeah, I just ordered another one to get it done. Let's get this going. We're gonna do the electronics and make this thing work. Just to give you like a really quick overview of like how this thing works, is it's basically like it's just a mechanical keyboard with some potentiometers in it, wired up pretty similar to if you've ever worked on a pinball machine. The switches, they're in a matrix. You got a matrix of switches, so that way it takes less inputs on the microcontroller, and then you got diodes to keep it from crossing and becoming others, activating at the wrong time. So yeah, pretty simple design going on here. I did not design this. You find this on Thingiverse, like I said. It's got all the instructions. It's got the BOM and everything that you need to get it going. So you can follow along at home and make your own Stream Deck. Like I said, I'm building this because my channel is growing enough that I figured I should do a Stream Deck instead of going into OBS and changing in the middle of a live stream to go in between. Because like I do a lot of screen shares in my live streams. If you're new to the channel, if you've never watched anything, I'll do these modifications to circuit boards where I have to go in and do some programming or something like that. So I'll show it on the screen, and I'll just change it to the live to the screen on here, and then in the middle of the live stream you have to see me pop up OBS to do it. So it'll be nice now. I'll just push a button and switch screens or whatever, and I can start and end my stream or whatever. So definitely going to be useful for me, for my channel. Hopefully you guys find it useful. So let's get into this build real quick. 4 parts that you need to 3D print. You have the bottom plate here, you have the main body here, and then you have the top plate, which holds the potentiometers. Now, these potentiometers hold in there really tight, so there are some clips you can print, but they're so tight, there's no need for the clips for me. I don't need them. Maybe your 3D printer, prints a little bit differently, and you end up needing them. And then the last part, the fourth part that you're going to 3D print is this jig right here. It's for bending your diodes. So you put them in there and bend them so that way you get them all the right size for doing this portion. So we'll get a better look at this here in a minute, but that's basically what you're doing there, is you're putting those diodes in there, and yeah, so this little jig right here just has some holes in it for the diodes to slide into. You trim them and bend them and solder them together. So this will make it really easy. It can be pretty tricky to do that kind of stuff without a jig. So we'll get into this and start building it real quick. So that way you guys can follow along at home, build your own Stream Deck, or if you're just curious what's going on here, you can watch the video. So let's get on. All right, so this step is optional. I'm going to solder on the header. You really don't actually have to solder on the header. You can solder each wire to the individual pins on here, but I just figured easier to use the header, so I'm going to use it. Be aware, you're going to put the header on opposite of what you normally do. So header goes up like this. If you put it down like that, it will not fit into the housing. I'll just demonstrate. So it goes like this. Like I said, you can put it in there without the header and just solder each wire onto the pins that you need them at, but I'm just gonna solder the header on, and then when I go to put these on, I'll just use the connectors like that and trim the wires to where I want. That's how I'm going to do it, but you definitely don't have to do it this way. You can always just put these in here, solder them like that, or you just use trimmed wire that's not even these at all. So it's personal preference on this. I just, out of simplicity of putting this thing together, I'm going to put the headers on. Okay, so for putting on the headers, you really have two options. You can put it in like an Omnivise like this. Since we're going to put them top side in, you set them in and then solder like 1 or 2 pins on there and flip it over. But my preferred method of putting headers on Arduinos and stuff, since they're just these standard breadboard sizes, is to just stick the headers in a breadboard and stick the Arduino on top of it and solder it down. So you just got to make sure you have it nice and flat on there, and you can put it on. So we're going to use a little bit of flux, some 6040 leaded solder, use some alcohol or a defluxer. I'm using defluxer, but 70 to 90% IPA works just fine. I do recommend keeping it at the 90%. It dries off faster, but you can go down to like 70% and it'll still work for cleaning off your leftover flux. But my preference is 90% IPA. I don't like the 90% alcohols because the 99% alcohols because they dry out a little too fast. But the 90% seems to be just that perfect amount of it evaporates fast for getting it off of there, but it sticks around long enough to actually clean stuff. So yeah, we got our header on there. Like I said, I find the easiest way of doing these is to just stick them in a breadboard and do it, but you can definitely stick them on here. You do it, since we're doing the header on upside down, you do it this way and just kind of tack the bottom, and then flip it over and just get the rest. Okay, so now we've finished this step, so we just pop that in there. Yep, it lines up just right with the hole there. So next step, we're going to put the last 2 nutserts on there. So if you've never done them before, all what you're going to use is a soldering iron at a lower temperature than you're used to. So I run it at 160 degrees Celsius, but you can really go anywhere between 160 and 220 degrees Celsius to put them on. I find 160 to work good for me because it's a low enough temperature that it's a slow process, so I don't accidentally stick them in way too far. I always just use a conical tip for it because I never use my conical tips for anything else. They're just, to me, it's a useless soldering tip. So I use them for putting in nutserts and stuff like that. However, they do actually make special soldering tips that are shaped. They basically have like a blunt end on them, and they're literally they're made for inserting nutserts. Well, I keep calling them nutserts, but I think there's a different name. I would definitely recommend putting these in before you put the keys in, because now it's kind of sliding around on me. I did the other ones before I did the key, and now I'm kind of struggling with it. Okay, so that's all there is to putting in those threaded inserts. Just that kind of low temperature on the soldering iron, stick them in there. Definitely, I would not recommend using like an unregulated soldering iron for doing that. Like just one of those plug in the wall Wellers. You'll be way too hot and it'll blast right through it. But yeah, that low temperature on there, you're able to just slide that on nice and easy. No real problems there, just kind of fish it up. But yeah, I really find conical soldering tips to be pretty much useless. So I use them for putting on these threaded inserts or nutserts, whatever you want to call them. I think most people call them threaded inserts. I just call them nutserts. I guess that's just from working on cars where I got that name for them. So Next step, we will wire in the rest of the diodes on the switches here. So let's get the jig out and get working on that. Okay, so for the diodes, we're going the anode down and the cathode up. So the black line goes up in the jig and the rest goes down. So all it does, it slides all the way in there. If it does not slide all the way down into the hole like that, just carve it out a little bit because the whole diode fits down in there. So again, black line up, and the third one goes in. There we go. Fits three of them. My 3D print on this one did not come out great. I did actually have to stab it a couple of times to. Okay, so once you have all three of them in, just lay it down. Get the next one on top of it, and just like that. For some reason, I have difficulty getting this last one to stay down, so I just hold it down with my finger when I solder it. So this one's the trickiest one to get done. Let's just solder it down now. Now, I think the intent of the jig was that it's supposed to be the right length on these, but I have found that they are too long for me. Maybe it's just the switches I used, but it's definitely too long. So after I trim it in the jig, I just trim them back down just try to get them about the same length on all of them. If you get them too far off, that's not going to line up at all. And see, now we line up nicely. I know it's kind of hard to see because of the tilt of this. When you're working on it, you can actually see very well what you're doing because of the angle of it. But on the camera, I get with the heads up view, you really need it kind of tilted. Like that's the view I'm getting. So plenty of room to see and plenty of room to work. So if you're concerned that you're not going to have room to work inside this, there really is. There's plenty of room. Especially with this really fine tip of the JBC, your Hakko kind of knockoff ones, they still fit in there just fine. So I really wouldn't be too concerned with getting your soldering iron in there. Let's go ahead and wet all of our pins that we're going to be soldering to on here. And that's going to help us once we get the diodes in here. So let's get this in. Just going to get the first one tacked on there. Once we get the first one tacked on, then we can easily get the rest down there. Now that was just a really quick, just getting it in place. Let's come back now with a little more solder to make sure we have good solid connections. We're not putting a ton of solder on here, leaving giant blobs. We only wet that before, so it's just barely tacked on there. Now we got a nice solid connection. Let's get the next one done, and then we will be done doing the diode portion of this. Okay, now if you find yourself having difficulty soldering these onto here, try adding a little extra flux. Now this solder that I'm using here has a lot of flux in it, so I really didn't need to add any in there. But if you are having problems getting it to flow, just try adding a little flux. Should go on nice and easy for you. So let's now get all of the ground wires that go in between these done up. So you just trim them to about length, strip them, and put them on. Okay, so it's now taking me 2 tries to get a recording here. Hopefully third time's the charm. But so what we need to do is trim up these little pieces of wire. We need about 2 centimeters is really what you're going for. Just a hair over 2 centimeters. Just stick it in here real quick and tin the wires. We've already tinned the things there. We've tinned the pins. Now we're just going to tin the wires so that way it's super easy to get it on there. But yeah, my first time recording it went to too long of a piece of wire, and second time I forgot to click record. So third time's a charm, and then I will knock them all out real quick so that way y'all don't have to watch me do the whole thing. Take a pair of tweezers, because it is a little small, tedious thing to hold on to, and try to tack it on there without popping off the one that you already got on, and get the other side on. Alright, let's touch up that other side with just a hair more solder. There we go. And there we go. So that's our first row of them. It also needs the wire that's going to connect it to the Arduino. So that should be more than enough slack there for it. So yeah, we'll use this piece of wire here. Okay, so next we just need to add the wires to these guys. Okay, so now that we have the keyboard complete, let's get the potentiometers done. So first let's just pop them all in there. Okay, so now we have all our wiring done. So you have your VCC, your ground, and then your pins, they go to analog pins there. And then we have matrix row 1 and matrix row 2 is what I'm going to label those. So I'm not going to be able to capture wiring it up just because of the tight space here that we're working with. But yeah, let me get this together, and then I'll show you the diagram, the wiring diagram here of it, because really that's all you need anyways. You don't need to watch me plug them in. So let me just put the wiring diagram here on the screen for just a minute, and then we will continue on. Okay, so here's the wiring diagram real quick, and yes, I got it all wired up here. Kind of I should have used a little bit longer strips of wire. The only one that was too short was this red one, for the one row of the keys there. That would have been the row that pin 7 is that I did too short. So yeah, just give yourself a little more slack. I cut these to 5 centimeters, so I would say at least 7 or 8 centimeters gives you enough slack on your wires. And yes, they were all fancy and put some heat shrink on the end of their wires. I didn't bother. But yeah, this is the PDF for the assembly here. I will have it linked in the description with the link to the Thingiverse file for this anyways. So yeah, the wiring's really not that complicated. Pretty simple wiring. It just looks complicated because this is a mess, because I just didn't trim my wires long enough. I should have test fit stuff a little bit better. But I really want to get this thing done, so that's it. And in the beginning of the video, I said we only had to 3D print 4 parts. That is also because I am not 3D printing the slides here. I'm actually using the ones off of a Chevy truck AC, so that's why I didn't have to 3D print those. So now let's just get this thing screwed in. At least we'll get the bottom plate screwed in here, but this is how it goes together. since this is really the initial mock-up of it and I haven't tested it yet, I'm just going to put one screw on the bottom here, just in case we have to make some changes. Alright, let's get another one on there. That's not enough. Let's put a screw up top here too. Alright, those two screws should be enough to just hold it together so that way I can put the firmware on it and test it. Okay, so let's go over the software really fast on here. So this is the Thingiverse for it. You're going to need the Arduino file, so the INO. This is your sketch. You'll just download that, open it up in Arduino IDE, and then you need a couple of dependencies to make this work in here. So you need the control surface library, which you can find on GitHub. So let's go back to, alright, so the GitHub. So here is the GitHub with the, alright, so this is the control surface library. You just download the zip file, so download zip, and then you go into Arduino and go Tools, Manage Libraries, you go to Sketch, Include Libraries, Add Zip Library, and that'll install it. Then you need to add one more library that's not mentioned in the instructions. So if you read the PDF for setting this up, they don't mention it, but you also need to go to Manage Libraries and do MIDI USB. So MIDI USB, search, and it'll show up. So MIDI USB, install that. I already have it installed, and you've got everything you need to be able to upload it. So then just tools, make sure you have it on the correct COM port, which I'm on the correct COM port here, and have the correct programmer and have the correct AVR board. So that's everything we need there, and you just click the upload button, and now you have all the software onto your Stream Deck, and your Stream Deck's ready to use. So then you'll close out of Arduino IDE, you don't need that anymore, and you need to install the OBS MIDI plugin to OBS. This is the one he used in the instructions, so it's the one I continued to use, although there are other OBS MIDI plugins, but this is just the one that I used because it's in the PDF. So you just download this and follow the instructions here, which is you download the file and just put it into the folder for the plugins, and it'll work. So then you can go into OBS and go to Tools, go to OBS MIDI settings, configure, and you can start configuring it. So I've set up a couple of buttons already. I set up the volume controls and the record and to stop recording buttons, which you couldn't really see because it's in there. One thing, this is a little bit glitchy if you're changing settings while you're recording, so that not a good idea to go in there and start editing it while you're recording, but it works just fine. So yep, and you can see I'm in OBS here, and here's the volume control. So yep, that works, and there is desktop audio too. So yeah, the whole thing works. We're all set up here, and I'm happy with this. This was a nice, simple build. I hope you guys enjoyed watching the build, and you'll definitely be seeing this in future videos, maybe just off in the corner from when I'm doing my live stream. It'll probably be out of sight, but yeah, this was a very fun project, pretty simple, not too much involved. Yes, it cost about the same as a simple Stream Deck that you could buy. You could buy a Stream Deck with probably about the same amount of keys on it for a similar price. You wouldn't get it with all the faders though at this price. So yeah, this is about $50 to build this. That $50 accounts for all the extra keys I bought, all the extra keycaps I got, and you know I have extra components. I probably have enough components to build another one of these other than the faders. So yeah, it's a pretty simple project here. Fun for me. Hopefully, it's fun for you. And yeah, if you guys enjoyed the video, please like the video, subscribe, comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.